Are we ready? The clock has donged. Good evening. I am Councillor Sarah Barwick, the Chair of the Planning and Healthier Stronger Committee, Policy Advisory Committee. Yeah. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this evening's meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback at the Councillor's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No. I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Service team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building. There has been a change in the running order. It will now take as followed. Item 10, 11, then 20, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Are there any apologies?
You should have had apologies from Councillor Spooner, who is still unwell.
Thank you. Any substitutes?
Councillor Springett for Councillor Spooner.
Thank you. Item 3, urgent items. I intend to take item 20, responding to the consultation on the NHS 10-year plan, as an urgent item, as the response is due by the 2nd of December 2024.
Yes, I'm rather concerned that we have a consultation relating to a 10-year NHS plan dropped on the table, and it's now being asked to be taken as an urgent item. If I look at the list of reports, it clearly states it should have been made available as part of this agenda. So to actually just give it to us at the meeting, I just don't think is acceptable in terms of a completely new report. If it was an amendment to a report, that tends to be more likely to be accepted because people will hopefully have read the main agenda papers. But to bring a completely new agenda item forward to a meeting when it hasn't been circulated previously, I think is unacceptable, and I'm not sure it should be taken as an urgent item. I would like to seek officer advice on that in terms of this particular item, and what are the reasons for it being laid before us tonight, and then us being expected without having the chance to read a report to submit the council's review on a 10-year NHS plan.
Thank you. Anna?
It wasn't a fault on the forward plan because we didn't know it was coming forward. The consultation only went live, I think, at the end Monday last week. So we've prepared it as quick as we can prepare it, in order to make sure that it can go through the council's processes and that it is able to go to cabinet and it is able to be called in before we submit it. The submission date is on the 2nd of December. Now, I believe the report was circulated on Friday last week. Again, this was the earliest we could produce it, bearing in mind the little time we had been given notification of the consultation.
Yes,
I still don't find that particularly acceptable. We've seen one of the other policy advisory committees where they've recently deferred the date of the meeting because an important report wasn't going to be available the time the agenda had to go out. Now, if this is an important item, and one would assume the future of the NHS is for everybody sitting here, then I would have thought that could have been strong enough, given the officers obviously knew there was going to be a delay in the government producing it, to have actually sought to delay the date of this committee by a week or more, such that the report could have been published in the normal way. Producing a report on a Friday and expecting people to make a decision on something in such short time, when I know not everybody here works, but a large number of our councillors work, I just think is completely unacceptable. And I'd like my objection to agreeing this as an urgent item noted in the minutes by the committee clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll note that. As the chair, it was my decision to bring this up because of the deadlines necessary.
Could we just maybe have 5 or 10 minutes and then everyone can like have another read of it and then we're good to go? Do you think we could adjourn for like 5 or 10 minutes?
I'm happy with that if everyone else is. All right, we're adjourned for 10 minutes then. Thank you. hopefully you've had sufficient time. And we'll move on. Right, so item 4. Are there any visiting members? Are there any disclosures by members or officers? Item 6. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. Item 7. I move that all items are taken in the public. Is this agreed? Item 8. Minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of October. Is there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? I move that the minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of October 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Is there any comments concerning the democratic service from the... Oh, sorry, I shouldn't read that out. Right, item 9. Are there any comments on the forward plan? Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. I noted at the minutes of our last meeting, when we were looking at the forward plan just over a month ago, we were asking about the Kent cycling and walking infrastructure report and when that would come. Given it originally came to this committee, can't quite remember now, it was June or July, and it was urgent that we went out to consultation at the end of July and into August for 4 weeks because of the need to get the process done. Well, we're now, we asked this at the last meeting when we were told it was coming in November. We now see on the forward plan that it may be coming in December. I'd like to seek some assurance from the Cabinet member that the report will be coming in December, because otherwise there has to be a big question mark over why did we do such a rush consultation during the school holidays if we're only actually taking results of it in December, or, you know, it keeps slipping month by month, could be January. So that's the first thing. I noticed also perhaps some of the things which aren't on this forward plan, and the forward plan only seems to go up to December, despite the council year going through to April. And the two glaring things which I noticed aren't here is the strategic plan. Now, I know there was a workshop done on it in the middle of October, but there's no reference to a strategic plan coming to policy advisory committees, and one would assume the process would be that as a strategic plan is worked up, that it would go around the policy advisory committees prior to going to full council. Now, if we are to achieve a February meeting to approve a strategic plan, then presumably we will be needing to see something either in December, which on the face of this action forward plan, we're not, or in January, or we're not going to see anything at all. And the strategic plan then presumably slips from the February meeting to the April meeting. So virtually a year after the last local elections. You know, so that the, you know, and I from the leader's speech originally in July, there was a lot of stuff I liked. I'd like to see the council starting to implement some of it, and for us in overview and scrutiny, assisting in terms of refinements and so on. But a 4-year term, and it just looks to me like we're going to be through year 1 before we actually receive a strategic plan. And clearly linked to that is the future or not of having a leisure centre in the borough. So there are important things which are missing from this forward plan. I don't have any problems with anything which is in it. I say I'd like to seek an assurance about this Kent cycling and walking strategy coming to us in December. But I mean, it's a rhetorical question, to be honest, around the strategic plan when that's going to appear, because I imagine nobody knows. Otherwise, it would have been referenced in the forward plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
I can speak only to the strategic plan. The strategic plan follows the same process as the budget setting process, and both of those documents have to be agreed, with the strategic plan being the most senior document for the local authority, which sets the direction of the budget, and both of those have to be approved by council. You're quite right, Councillor Harper, before April. So I'm unclear as to why that's not showing on the forward plan. All I can do is go away and double check whether there's an error or there's been an issue of some kind, but it will follow the same process and journey of the budget. I can assure you of that. Documents are being pulled together at the moment. The public consultation has only just closed, so that consultation, along with consultation with businesses, other stakeholders and members that was undertaken, are all being pulled together to be presented before the Cabinet, and then they will go through the journey of the PACS, Cabinet and then Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to reassure Councillor Harper, I discussed the cycling and walking strategy, which I think should be a walking and cycling strategy, last week with the officer who is working through the consultation responses, and I understand that there were more responses, and those responses are far more detailed than I think was anticipated. But the last that I heard was that we are on course for the date within the forward plan, unless colleagues have a different view. No.
Thank you. Does any other Cabinet member wish to make a comment?
I just wanted to agree with what Councillor Harper said. Obviously, during the summertime, I know a number of us went around our wards promoting the cycling and walking plan. So it is disappointing that we're still not able to go back to our residents with the outcome of that survey.
Thank you. So after those comments, I move that the forward plan be noted. Is this agreed? Thank you. Right, item 10. Right. This notice of motion has been referred to the committee from the full council on Wednesday the 25th of September. The Policy Advisory Committee is able to recommend to Cabinet to adopt the motion. Yes, to adopt the motion with amendments or take no action. So it's to be introduced by Councillor Thompson. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Barwick. Chair. Good evening, members. Very nice to see you all. I'm delighted to see item 10 on the agenda today. I was very interested in Councillor Cannon's arguments that he put to us in September. First of all, I would like to say how sorry I am that it's taken this long for it to reach this stage of the proceedings, echoing Councillor Harper's comments. I too am frustrated by how slowly the administrative wheels turn. So I'm delighted we've reached this stage. I would simply want to point out, I shall make more remarks about industrial strategy later in the evening, so I will spare you that now. You will know from the papers that we put on your tables at the first council meeting that this item is pushing at an open door. We are very enthusiastic about the promotion of farming and the promotion of the business of farmers and all things they're related to. So I look forward to everyone's constructive contributions to taking in mind the points as put by Councillor Cannon and colleagues in the council meeting, and obviously minded to consider the debate which happened at the time. that is history now. We're interested in moving on, and I look forward to your constructive comments. Thank you all very much.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I was the seconder of this motion, and so I'm really pleased to see that it's made it to this pack. I just want to say, like, look what happens when we all work together. Look what we can do. It's really good. So, and I think thank you to whoever wrote the report, because you've also highlighted again once more how important the farming industry is to Maidstone. So we're higher than the Kent and Medway percentage, and we're the second highest in the Kent districts after Swale. So I think that's really good, and thank you to whoever got all the facts and wrote those in there. It's actually quite cheery in what has been a not great week for farming, but I'll probably leave that bit there, and hopefully all of my colleagues will just say, yes, can Cabinet have a look at it? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I agree with Claudine, Councillor Russell. I think when we all work together, as on most of the items, most of what we do here, we all work together to try to push through for the betterment. Yes, clearly there are times when we might not always all agree, but I think the fact that it went through the council meeting only in September and we've got this tonight, I would fully endorse the Cabinet do what it can do when it discusses it to look at tightening up policies around it. And as I say, actually that figure of 3.6%, working in sort of agriculture and food and drink and so on is a very large percentage of our working population. And I think we need to do everything we can do, especially in the context of the problems of the hospitality industry, to help promote, our local food the food businesses to our local population. I think one of the things you might want to do, there used to be a Kent initiative before, I think, in terms of promoting agriculture and food production across the whole of Kent. I seem to think I've got some information about that at home, so it may be worth, when you're looking into this, looking at, what other councils do. I'd thought especially Swale, given their reliance on this sector. But yeah, I look forward to seeing the proposals the Cabinet would like to take forward on this. So I'm more than happy to support Councillor Russell in proposing this goes unamended to the Cabinet.
Thank you. So does the committee recommend the motion on? Sorry, didn't see you.
I had a query about something that was in the report, and I think it's just a typo. In 2.21, it says, in our preventing financial inclusion strategy. Should that be preventing financial exclusion? Because I'm hoping we don't have a preventing financial inclusion strategy. Yep. Okay. My only other comment was about the actual motion. I think the wording was, sorry. Always including Kentish meat and dairy. I did recently attend an event with an absolutely lovely buffet and everything was vegan. So by saying that we always have to include Kentish meat and dairy, obviously we could be excluding certain people from events.
Thank you. Anyone else I've missed?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a brief one from the full council. There obviously was an unsuccessful amendment, which absolutely fine. But in terms of pushing an open door, the final point of that was to investigate whether, as NBC, as a council, we can look at bringing in farmers markets, small scale farmers markets to the town centre, and whether that's feasible or not. Not guaranteeing that they do happen, but actually just investigating. I would hope that we would be able to amend this motion slightly without watering down any other point, to just be able to have a look to see whether that is feasible. So I'd like to move that, if that's okay.
All right, so could you repeat the amendment again, please? Repeat the amendment again, please.
So the actual text of the amendment would be as per the elements which referred to investigating the possibility of small-scale farmers markets within the town centre, which was delivered at full council. Not changing anything else in the proposal at all, just to see whether it is possible, whether it is feasible to further bolster this industry.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
I just really wanted to pick up on Councillor Greenham's point. The point that we were writing here is, I mean, at all of the events, we generally have a full variety of food, meat, dairy. The point is that British farmers farm to higher standards, and that's why we wanted Kentish meat and dairy. So that was the point of it. It wasn't driving it, excluding, you know, other. And we've got local fruits and produce. So it was, I think it was just making the point that if we do have meat and dairy, we know that it's locally sourced, and that's one of the key objectives. So thank you, and very happy with the amendments. Yeah.
So does the committee accept the amendment? Thank you. And does the committee accept the motion with the amendment and the recommendation? Thank you. Right, item 11, to note the motion. Oh, sorry. This note of, that makes sense to me. Of the motion has been referred to the committee from full council on the 25th of September this year. The Policy Advisory Committee is able to recommend to Cabinet to adopt the motion with amendments, or take no further action. Right.
So if I may, I mean, colleagues will remember the really quite long debate there was at full council in September around the motion to investigate either the incorporation into the existing Kent Downs National Landscape, or as a standalone national landscape, the Greensand Ridge. And historically, we had already worked with our neighbouring local authorities to make a bid to Mr. Gove when he was Secretary of State. Historically, that sadly was unsuccessful. However, the world has moved on a little bit. I mean, we've all seen that DEFRA have just released a document whereby they have explained that their key focus for ensuring that 30% of the UK's land area is managed with biodiversity in mind should be predicated upon national landscapes. And the Greensand Ridge, because of the underlying soils, has not been as intensively farmed as perhaps other landscapes in the county have, and therefore has more intact a more intact biodiversity, as well as being very scenically attractive. I think my one concern, which screams out to me from the report that is before you, is that it uses the local plan landscape of local value as the footprint potentially for the Greensand Ridge area. However, it is not the geological Greensand Ridge, the escarpment that runs from Nettlestead all the way to Bourton Mallow, because if you remember back to 2015 to 16, the kind of time when the LLVs were being investigated, it was at the time when special landscapes areas had just been scrapped, and there was really a big push from government not to protect the landscape. I think the world has moved on. We understand that we do need to protect our finest landscapes for a number of reasons. And therefore, I would suggest that when we look at the Greensand Ridge, we don't just look at this very limited section of the scarp, which it comprises the two LLVs, because even for the SCARP, I mean, just looking at the page in front of me, all the area around Fairbourne Heath and up Windmill Hill to Knoll Hill somehow is just missing, and yet there is no rhyme or reason to that. And the dip slope, places like which are very heavily wooded, and essentially the plateau of the Green Sand Ridge, again, is not currently covered by the LLV. So I suggest that when we make the approach to the Kent Downs National Landscape Unit for discussion at their joint advisory committee, we need to ensure that we understand the footprint of what we think is the landscape worthy of designation and worthy of protection, because I actually think that it is a clear omission. Other parts of the Green Sand Ridge are part of the Kent Downs National Landscape, the area around Toys Hill and so on in Sevenoaks. But for some reason, the Maidstone stretch is not protected. But, you know, tell me at the deer parks at Bourton-on-Chelsea or at somewhere like Knoll Hill that I've just mentioned that is not a magnificent, nationally significant landscape. It clearly is. But we need to make sure we've got our ducks lined up. I think that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I take the points on board from the Cabinet member. Back in the day before the adoption of the 2017 local plan, we had these landscapes of local value, and I remember very clearly looking at some of the maps, and at Lewes Valley, for instance, the base of Lewes Valley and the Lewes side of the slope was in the landscape of local value, but the Stockett Lane and sort of the slope towards Cox Heath was not in it. And I remember turning up to what was strategic planning at that time and addressing the committee and asking for half of a valley to be added to landscape of local value. There were also some ad hoc fields that weren't included. And I remember talking to officers who said that they weren't sure about adding them because they thought they might come forward in the future for housing development. And I think one of the things that when you look at a landscape, you don't think, oh, actually, perhaps that little chunk there might come forward for housing. So we actually increase the protection for the Lewes Valley, and there are a number of other incidents. And I totally take on board this idea of in the Bourton Mallaby parish to the east, we've totally come to a screeching halt. So I do welcome those comments, and I think we're asking for a paper to go to Cabinet, and I think that that paper should be written, and I think the points that are raised to this point today should be considered thoroughly. I think also outside of this item, I think we should all be looking at our landscapes of local value and not be sort of how can I say, restrained by the boundaries, because there's still some more work to be done on those which are now becoming quite out of date. So I think we should really start to major on protecting our landscapes. Green Sand Ridge is unique, and I'd like to propose that we do move forward and take this, adopt this motion and take it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Harper.
So thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with, I mean, I support everything what Councillor Harwood said. I had my civil ceremony at Bourton-on-Chelsea Place, and one of the reasons we chose it actually was the view overlooking that element of the Weald. Is you get actually from there you cannot see any roads, or you don't see any power lines or anything, which actually supports the idea of the low Weald landscape local value, or whatever the precise terminology is in the local plan. And as people remember at the council meeting, I said, look, in addition to this site, I felt there was also importance in terms of Lewes Valley, the Len Valley, the Medway Valley and the Low Weald, all of which are in the current updated local plan. So I would urge that the Cabinet also looks and gives further consideration to what, picking up what Councillor Clark said, how we can protect those other areas further, given the government's push in terms of the housing numbers and the additional housing we're likely to have to absorb. I've got a question, and that's if we look on paragraph 2.24, where it says Nature England have advised that they are therefore not considering any additional landscape designation cases at the current time. Now, I think Councillor Harwood suggesting that we try to tie this on to the recommendations in 2.22, looking at the Surrey Hills. I just wondered if, that perhaps the officers have any feel as to how successful they may feel we may be in trying to, tie on our part of the Greensand Ridge onto other bits, presumably given that when we suggested it before, we weren't successful.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I want to come on board with this, but I have got a couple of issues. One is that where the report says, as Councillor Harper said, Natural England have advised they're not considering any landscape designation cases at this current time, and they advise against people investing significant time and resources in preparing speculative reports. So my issue is, when we look at the council as a whole, and we've got all of the pressures of temporary accommodation, all the things that we need to make sure that we do for our residents, if they're not accepting current designations, those reports are going to cost a lot of money to produce. You're going to need evidence. I'm thinking of value for pound for my residents. And if there's the people that you're going to submit it to are saying at this current time they're not going to accept any more, that does concern me. The other thing that I just always quite find funny is that everyone talks about the Greensand Ridge, but yet when I looked at the KM article, the picture in that article is the view. It's never the Greensand Ridge, it's the view from the Greensand Ridge. And the Greensand Ridge has recently just been made somewhat more, I would say, ugly with the granting of the planning permission for the massive care home that's going to go on it. So I do question why we would seek to look at that bit when everything I've ever seen is the view from it, not when you're looking up at the Greensand Ridge itself. So for those reasons, I'm afraid I can't go with this. So I would propose that this doesn't go to Cabinet.
Second.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, if I may come back on the process issue. Yes, Natural England has stated that it does not currently have the resources to go through the process of allocating new national landscapes. However, what has been stated by Natural England is that the approach that we could take is through an extension the Airbnb unit. It had a view that they were not at that time permitted to extend into additional areas. That has now been clarified and they are permitted to do so. And in fact, there have been a number of recent extensions of the Kent Downs, and the Kent Downs National Landscape team have agreed to take this matter as an item to discuss and look at. And I just want to kind of restate that other parts of the Greensand Ridge are protected within the Kent Downs, sections within Tunbridge and Morling, sections within Sevenoaks. It conks out just before our border, and ours isn't protected. And the reason why that we need to look at national landscape protection is that, frankly, the Greensand Ridge, like all of our countryside, is under very significant pressure at the moment. And I think that the Greensand Ridge, scenically, because it's an escarpment, it is the obvious one where we could gain approval and agreement. And it also links into the fact that other parts of the Greensand Ridge are already part of that national landscape. And then coming back to Councillor Harper's point around the local landscape value designations, I absolutely agree that looking at this document, I cannot see that the boundaries make much sense to me. And the way that that is being tackled is through the landscape character assessment work, which is going forward already. The preliminary work is taking place on that. And just to affirm that I am fighting my corner on that, in an informal cabinet meeting when there was a kind of reference from officers to the cost and so on, I made it very clear that it's a priority of this council to protect our countryside, and that document is going to be a key plank of doing that. And we are finding a planning committee, for all those colleagues who are on planning committee, that the new local plan wording, with our having to prove significant harm to the landscape, is causing us some challenges. So therefore we need to update our landscape character assessment if we're going to win appeals, and if we are going to get the best possible form of development where development is permitted.
Thank you. I'll take the officer, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, speaking as an officer, in terms of cost, I appreciate we have to be very careful on costs, but exploring the designation of a new national landscape within Maidstone's administrative boundaries would not cost much. This report was written by one of my officers. We know where the topographical feature of the Greensand Ridge is. It's in the 2012 landscape character area assessment, so it's not new work. It's just an identification. Secondly, if it was to become a national landscape like the North Downs, speaking as a planning officer, its views toward and views from a national landscape, they're both equally important as each other. And then lastly, like Councillor Harwood said, I don't think I've been too dramatic here. Back when we designated, in terms of Maidstone Borough Council, made the decision to have landscapes of local value, that was against a landscape, no pun intended, of the government doing away with local landscape designations. So we were pioneers in sort of bringing it back. Yes, maybe we could have been more ambitious, but most councils didn't do anything at all. But the national landscape, and we've decided to follow that, has become a lot bleaker. When I started in planning a long time ago, it was if you're outside the town of Maidstone or outside the village envelope, it's countryside, open countryside, and it's protected for its own sake, and it's a refusal. Then about 2014, something like that, the government introduced harm. So you had to demonstrate harm to the countryside. So that made things more difficult, as Councillor Springett and Planning Committee know. When the test was, if I can put it this way, just harm, unfortunately, we have lost a significant amount of appeals. But the bar has become much, much lower now, because we, Planning Committee, myself, at appeal now have to demonstrate significant harm. So in very simple terms, the more we celebrate our countryside and protect it, as Councillor Harwood said, we are, with the mandate from Planning Committee, and we're bringing it back to this, bringing it to this committee next month, this landscape character assessment to be very simplistic about it, the more armaments we have, the better. Because we ain't got much defence at this point in time.
Councillor Springer. Thank you. I'd like the whole of Kent to be designated actually to protect it. It's the Garden of England once and it's not anymore. I'll tell you where my problem comes from. We've got the Natural England saying they're not considering any new cases. Then we've got the Kent Downs unit saying that they think they could extend the boundary, yet the Glover review said that was unfavourable. So we've got the Glover review responded to the previously suggested incorporation of the Greensand Ridge into the Kent Downs AONB as it was, and that they proposed you look to do it in its own right. Now we've been told they're not going to look at it in its own right, so we've got a bit of a chicken and egg. However, 2.29 says that recent conversations with the Kent Downs unit have indicated that an item will be added to the next meeting of the Kent Downs Joint Advisory Committee in November to reopen the discussion around extending the Kent Downs National Landscape to potentially incorporate the Greensand Ridge. So should we not wait before we commit any money to reports or anything? Should we not wait and see what the outcome of their discussions are? Because if they say, well, we've had a look at it and we don't think we can incorporate it, then we're somewhat stuffed and we would have spent a whole load of money on a report. It may be a small amount of money, but it's still money. So we can't apply for it in its own right, but the Kent Downs unit have said they've got it on their agenda to discuss. So I actually think we shouldn't do anything at the moment and we should defer until such time as they've had a look at it and decided whether they could incorporate it or not. Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of those points. It wouldn't cost much. Great. Well, let's make a stab at how much that would be and write it in the report, because I can only really go on the event, the information that's in a report that's given to me in front of me. So I do need to know those numbers. The context that we're working in at the moment is a government that wants to build much more, wants to drive growth, wants to put houses everywhere, wants to uplift the numbers in our boroughs, wants to come to Greenbelt and look at Greybelt and look at changing bits of that and putting. And now I don't agree with any of that, but I do think we need a reality check that that is the overall larger environment that we are working in. And if we protect one bit, another bit, everywhere else gets hammered. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at this. I'm just saying that if we looked at it, we submit it to the people that are going to mark our homework, and they've already said they're not accepting any more designation cases at this current time. I could get on board with Councillor Springett, where you're saying we could wait and see what the Kent Downs Joint Advisory Committee says in November. That's not long to wait, and I think that's a really sensible suggestion. So I'd be happy to change my proposal to say that we wait to see what they say in November and have a look at this again, if you would accept that. But unless anyone else has got to say, I think we've got a proposal on the table, so we should move to the vote. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder on that proposal, and that is to wait until after the other body has looked at it and bring it back to the...
So can I come back on this? Because we know where the Greensand Ridge is. It's a geological formation, an escarpment running across the county. We know that most of the Greensand Ridge in Kent is protected as part of the Kent Downs. We know that the Kent Downs unit did not have a problem with discussing it. They just thought procedurally they couldn't. They now have established that they can. And when it goes to the Joint Advisory Committee, we clearly need to take a report to the Joint Advisory Committee, which is essentially the preliminary work that we're talking about here. So we can't go along to the JEC without any documentation. We go along there with our argument, and hopefully I'll promote it there, and it will be agreed. So I would counsel colleagues that it's really, really important, the Greensand Ridge, and we need to do everything we can to protect it. Otherwise it's going to become, frankly, polytunnels and Cravo greenhouses.
Yeah, I've got a lot of people now want to speak on this, so Councillor Clark, I think yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if we want to send a message that we're trying to protect one of our most valued landscapes, and we go out there and we say, oh, actually, we're going to hold back a bit, we're going to have a think about this, it doesn't really send the strongest message that we are doing our level best to push this forward and take some sort of leadership on this. Linton Park, for instance, the deer park that was mentioned earlier, that landscape has been up for sale. Now, if a developer sees that there's no protection for the Greensand Ridge outside of the section that's listed here, they're going to be ambitious. They're not going to say, "Oh, let's wait to see what this committee does. Let's see if there might be some protection that comes forward." I imagine they would try to be ambitious. So I feel now is the time for us to be ambitious and actually say, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're bullish about it. And if we need to go along and make a case to the Kent Downs, we make a case, and we make a strong case. We say that when in this committee, we want to move this forward.
Thank
you. Just to be clear, what is the cost of doing this report? How long will it take? And when is this meeting with Kent Downs? Because it's a case of having all our ducks in a row for me, that I completely want this to happen. Completely. And I've witnessed the ridge that I grew up on been decimated. I really want this to happen. We've had a huge development that no one wanted, and people in this room voted for. Okay, and I was here with a resident, so I really want this to happen. I really want that protection as far as we can to future-proof it, knowing that future-proofing isn't really, at some point they're going to want land in 50 years' time. They're going to go, we're going to have to rethink this. How much is that report? How long will it take? And when is this meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, if you'd like to answer, Rob.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think what some councillors are saying is that the entire topographical feature, i.e. the Greensand Ridge, should be included so that we know where the dip slope is. We know where the crest is, we know where the scarp slope is. And I think Councillor Clark said, and it does seem sensible to me, that it continues up to our eastern and western boundaries. So that doesn't seem like very costly work to me. It's just a matter of identifying it on a plan.
Councillor Harper.
I can see the arguments from both sides in terms of this, but I think I'm being swayed by Mr. Jarman in terms of saying that we're not suddenly going to be employing consultants to produce something, that through the work we've done on the original local plan and the updated local plan, the council's already got the information needed to do the presentation to the relevant meeting with this Kent Downs unit we're talking about. And if that's the case, and I can see him nodding, then I feel reassured that we aren't going to be incurring significant costs. Yes, there will be an element of planning, staffing cost in terms of pulling all the information, which I think from my understanding exists already, but we're not going to, in doing that, and I pick up what Councillor Russell said about the overwhelming need we've got is the problems around homelessness. That relevant work wouldn't be able to be done on homelessness because we're talking to a planning officer working on these sorts of things, as opposed to a housing officer working on policies linked to homelessness. So I think I'm persuaded that we should allow this work to go ahead. Now, it's whether anything can be done between tonight and this meeting of the Joint Advisory Committee, obviously later this month. I suppose that's the question, isn't it? Because that's a critical place. Either we can get a package of documents from what we've already got to that meeting in November, or we can't. And if we can't get it there in November, then there's not much point in a way proceeding with this because we've missed the opportunity. So I suppose I'm really seeking from Mr. Jarman whether he feels we've got a sufficient time between now and this November meeting in Para 2.29 to get the relevant case ready for presentation to that. Because if it can't be done, then we're not going to be able to go anywhere with this.
Councillor Keeley, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to be so tenacious like a vegetarian dog with my bone, but when is this meeting and will it be ready in time? Can we do it? If it's tomorrow, then we're up a creek without a paddle. If it's the end of November, then it's something that's feasible. Where there's a few unknowns here. I just wonder if anybody does know when it is, and typically how long. I know you can't say, well, so and so is going to get it done tomorrow and Friday, but would it take a week? Would it take a few days? I know this is the stuff the people who are employed to do this, the officers, it's their job to do this. Will it be something that can be done in a short space of time? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to see in my diary if I have a date for this meeting. I don't appear to. I'll carry on looking, but it would take a relatively short time, a matter of days. Yeah, not weeks. Yeah, I think that is achievable. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Can I then ask for the vote? So we have the original proposal, which was to
To adopt the motion and move forward with the report.
Thank you. So I'll take that vote first. All those in favour of that? The original proposal was for this policy committee to recommend to the Cabinet to adopt the motion.
The original one, and then I think you came. No, but I spoke first, and I proposed it when I first was introduced to speak.
Anyway, one way or another, we get to the votes. Was it? It wasn't an amendment. It was. No, it was proposed. It
was a proposal, that's right, but I'd already made a proposal.
Yeah. So all those in favour of adopting the motion? Thank you. All those against? Sorry, that's carried. Moving on to item 20. That is the I've got it here. Yeah, the report to consider the NHS 10-year plan, and I believe that's going to be introduced by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. This report has come to this committee at great haste. I would like to reassure all the members that the reason that this report has come to this committee at great haste is because your current cabinet insisted that it came to this meeting. Councillor Harper is right to express discontent with lastminute.com and associated phenomena. As I understand the process, we didn't need to bring either this consultation or the consultation on the industrial strategy to this room at all. And that very much stuck in our throats. We insist that while we may be operating under the cabinet system at this time, it is our intention to operate it as much like a committee rather than the cabinet system as we can possibly manage. Councillor Harper, I hope that you will take therefore my remarks in that spirit. We welcome your comments composed at haste this evening. For those of you that didn't get the emails of the urgent updates previous to this evening, we are very much open and attentive and patient to your comments. So I hope that that is appreciated. We wish the response that we put into government on the 10-year NHS plan, and indeed on the other item that we'll come to a little later, to indeed reflect the views of this whole council and all of the members in it. So please pass that message around. This report we have brought before members today is proposed formal response to the government consultation for change in the NHS over the next decade, the largest public consultation since its inception. This report has been circulated as an urgent item as we were only invited to respond at the beginning of last week, and the window for responses closes on the 2nd of December. Not only are we responding to ensure our representation in the national consultation, so the specific needs of our borough are not overlooked, but we are pleased to seek your further input and support, as I have explained. The new government has taken the position that, quote, the NHS is broken and needs fundamental reform for it to be fit for service. I'm not entirely sure that I want to agree with that statement. I have various family members who I've accompanied on trips to local NHS services over recent years, indeed decades, and have little but praise for the services that they have and continue to receive. So I think that statement needs to be caveated somewhat. Nevertheless, we are desperate for constructive reforms, and which are here proposed through three main shifts in the operation of the National Health Service. Firstly, moving care from hospitals into the community where appropriate. Secondly, moving services from analogue to digital as appropriate. Thirdly, moving the focus from treating sickness to preventing sickness, which I do think is a long overdue move. The report outlines the position of health and social care in Maidstone. It includes the needs of the residents, where we see that our services are performing well, and what challenges we currently face and will continue to face implementing the government's 10-year plan for the National Health Service. The consultation put to us asks organisations to respond to 5 questions, and the proposed full response is in your appendix. Our response to the 3 shifts highlights the importance of an integrated health and social care system to ensure that people can move between services and that their needs are met, especially for those that are the most vulnerable. Our response recognises that funding, workforce and resource need to be in place for this to be successful. The response describes digital exclusion and how that would further affect those living in Maidstone when moving more services from analogue to digital platforms. We are a district authority attempting to work with a higher tier authority, and so the response details that to move from sickness to prevention, a holistic approach needs to be taken that addresses the wider determinants of health lying in our hands, such as housing, environment, education and the economy. We argue for more effective cooperation across these authorities for this reason, and we go on to point out that significant reduction in health inequalities surely demands what we have already described as a health in all policies approach. I finally would like to point out how very grateful I am to a wide range of senior and new officers in the council, along with a number of colleagues, not least Councillor Jeffrey, who have contributed to this report. I must mention Officer Brown, who is with us this evening, who was told at very short notice to change the items on her desk We're very grateful for their assistance. And as I've explained, we brought this item to you because we know that you will care about its contents. You will be as passionately concerned about our feedback as we are, and I welcome your partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of points that just came to mind as I was going through this at the beginning of this meeting. One is this kind of, how can I say, there's almost this sense of seamlessness between social care and the NHS, which in reality is often completely broken. And I really want to mention respite care because I think there should be more mention of this in this document, and I hope that that might be taken on board. I'm put in mind of a group, an establishment like the Dorothy Lucy Centre in Maidstone, which used to be a KCC facility. It's been closed down. It used to provide respite care to prevent bed blocking in the NHS. It also provided dementia day services, and I met a lot of the parents and the relatives of people that were involved in that, and they essentially said that if you have an individual with dementia, especially if it's like an elderly relative, let's say, for instance, they can live on their own, but they need a certain amount of, how can I say, intense care from their family. And if a family has to work 24/7 and without any relief, it becomes completely unsustainable. But the one thing that struck me about the Dorothy Lucy Centre is 1 day a week of dropping somebody off with a group of like-minded people that became friends, sometimes up to 50 people in a day, would be enough for that family to go out, to go shopping, to do sorts of things that they needed. And when asked about the impact of the closure of Dorothy Lucy, they said without that 1 day, they would go to full-time residential care. So I think sometimes we don't look at these small wins that we can gain. And at the time, KCC had said that they wouldn't close it until they were looking at commissioning. They wouldn't close it until they had the equivalent care elsewhere to provide when that facility closes down. Now, in the end, it was a fight, but it stayed open for 18 months beyond the point at which it was due to close. And that was because we challenged them to say, you haven't found equivalent care. But even after that 18 months, the equivalent was not 50 spaces somewhere else, because it wasn't as if there was a care home with 50 spaces available that they could just take over from Dorothy Lucy. It became commissioned as one space in Bearsted, one space in Headcorn, one space, and by the time you get to 50, you're out in Gravesend. So we lost an awful lot, and a lot of those, although they were offered equivalent services, most of the families just said, forget it, we're not going to be driving to and fro Gravesend, we'll just find a different outcome. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at. Just a small amount of intervention can change the overall cost by a significant amount. Respite care, same thing. You know, if you can, that centre had overnight beds for people that they didn't need the intensity of hospital care, but they couldn't go home. But with that small amount of intervention, they could convalesce and get back to their home. And that's what we really should be, when we talk about getting back into the community, it isn't just a case of putting someone up, it's a case of working out how to gradually get them there with that sort of support. Also, I mean, I hope that point's taken. I'm happy to give you further if you need to come back to me. But in terms of this SEN provision and the sort of treatment of children that might need, let's say, medication for ADHD, just to get an actual diagnosis, you can come into the school system at year 11 and you can be past your GCSEs before you even get to be assessed, if you are lucky enough to be assessed. There's around 4,500, 5,000 people on the waiting list, and these are costly diagnosis procedures that some parents might do it privately. It's very costly. Most people aren't going to be able to do that. So we are failing some of those individuals. And I'm not talking about extreme intervention. I'm talking about people that may actually be, they might be slightly neurodivergent, they might be achieving relatively well in their exams, but with us getting on top of what's going on with SEN on the NHS side, we might actually be able to get better outcomes there.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. Stephen, I did have a quick chance to go through this to look at the answers to the questions, but I think one of the questions perhaps we're not being asked is about, sorry, with anything the NHS ultimately comes down to how much money are you willing to invest in it? You know, the buildings are falling apart, the lack of staffing, historic lack of training, these things all need to be tackled, but they're going to cost money. And we're not, one of the things, you know, the elephant in the room with this consultation is that the government's not willing to ask people about that. Now, there is no miracle figure of how much one needs to spend on health, but it's very clear that in this country, we're not spending what's needed for an aging population. And you know, we're suffering with partly the impact of Brexit in terms of getting qualified staff from abroad. So whilst the government through this wishes to, well, I mean, as you said, they use the word broken, so presumably, you know, repair the NHS, the only way we can get staffing quickly to actually address that before we can train staff up in this country, because you're looking at typically a 4 to 7 year training period. You have to go to university, and then you have a couple of years after that, even if you to be a nurse, and a doctor or GP requires a further tranche of years before they're allowed to practice. So even if we started a massive training program now, those people won't be available in this country for 7 or 8 years. So how are we going to improve the health service? I think there's a question, and I think, you know, it's not necessarily ideal, but potentially looking at bringing in trained people from overseas. We've done it in the 1940s. You know, if we're really serious about trying to improve the health service, you know, we do need to be willing to, I think, ask that question of the government. We cannot train people up overnight, and as a report says, which I was flabbergasted to look at, because I do remember us being involved or asked to put comments in when Canterbury Christchurch University started the courses around things like midwifery. To find that's now been lost its accreditation, I mean, there'll be less people coming through a process to be able to move on to be trained in terms, for instance, of midwifery. So I think, as I say, the question, a lot of it comes down to money. We're right to refer to health inequalities in terms of poor quality housing, not just in Maidstone, but across the country. Our housing stock in this country is, on an international scale, generally poor. When I talk to friends who've come to Britain over the last 20 years from other countries, they are amazed at the poor level of insulation in this country, which is automatically, for instance, provided elsewhere. So issues of damp and cold, which are perennial problems here, don't happen elsewhere. I think we need to look at investments linked into this in terms of the holistic thing. I completely agree with your statements around air pollution. I suffer with asthma, and I know that when I've been away from Maidstone for a period of time, when I come home, my breathing tends to deteriorate because of the level of air pollution we have on our main roads. I think we need to, and I fully support all what Brian was saying in terms of respite care. Without respite care, you're never going to have any attempt to resolve some of the bed blocking. I actually work for a welfare rights charity in Islington, and we have various projects funded by our local health service. And the reason they are doing that is because we are experts in the whole area of people getting personal independent payments, as well as universal credit, which becomes very important for current patients when they have been either sectioned or in hospital for a period of time, and they are looking to be discharged from hospital. They need to have access to full universal credit, and unless they're given the support to do that, which we provide at work, we know those people won't get out of hospital. So I think that's also something we should perhaps look into in terms of our response. And I think digital exclusion, which is referred to in a number of places here, I think is incredibly and a really big issue. I say at work, we come across this. I know I've highlighted a number of times at this council, especially since COVID, the problem of people being digitally excluded. And when we look in page 330 on 3.4, by making more services only bookable online, you're not only you're excluding large tranches of a population, probably larger tranches of a population, perhaps not necessarily in Maidstone, but in the country. And those people aren't just the typical people you would assume who are elderly. It's people who potentially have a lower quality of education. And we discussed the issue around gypsies and travellers and how we can consult with them with their typically low level of learning and literacy. There are large proportions of our population who are not digitally included, if you like. I myself sometimes don't like all this digital sharing of information and, you know, having to download apps. They don't always work. There's various blocks to them. And if we're moving to a health service where you can't book things online, that's going to deter people until it's too late. They will then get taken in by someone, or they phone up 999, they'll go in a hospital, they will be treated there, probably, perhaps permanently, depending on what's happened to them, but they could have been avoided. But if they've been digitally excluded and not had the ability to get services when they needed them, you know, that ultimately lead to a lot more cost. And so digitalization is quite often in these types of human areas, not necessarily the best way forward. It looks like cheap cost savings, and it is cheap cost savings. There's a massive cost to it, which I think we really need to feed back. And I suppose my other comment on this was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more now, there was the drive for social prescribing, and I think that's never really been fully realised. I think there's massive opportunities in terms of social prescribing for people, especially potentially with mental health issues, who could get out. If we look at the Blackthorn Trust and the sort of work they can do on a much bigger scale, social prescribing can help. The leisure centre, again, with a lot of people, especially with you're overcoming physical problems, social prescribing to a leisure centre or a sports facility can really save money, and that money can be reinvested. So I do think, I like what I see here, but perhaps if we can just beef it up a bit and somewhere try to raise the elephant in the room, which we know the government's trying to avoid the discussion around, which is money, and and bringing in people from overseas short term while we're training up people in this country. Those aren't necessarily popular things, but I think if we're to try to address these things quickly, you have to be willing to look at everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Can I first of all say well done to the Cabinet member on a detailed response to this questionnaire. Talking of elephants in the room, this is very detailed and, goes on about the synergy and not working in silos and all of that. I just wonder if some part in question 1 and again in mainly question 1, we should just write where it says, what does your organisation want to see included in the 10-year health plan and why? more NHS GPs and more NHS dentists. And we haven't really stated that, and yet that's the one thing that in any consultation that we ever do, people say they don't have enough of. So I just wonder if it's just, you could just add that sentence in. I think that would be good. On question number 4, which is, what does your organisation see as the biggest challenges and enablers to spotting illnesses earlier, tackling the causes of ill health? You've mentioned about the Sure Start centres and the family hubs. I think, again, an overall point is just those touch points are being eroded between the organisations. And the other main one that I wanted to mention was the KCC wardens, because the community wardens, because a lot of the time they do go and visit a lot of the elderly in our certainly in some of our social homes and our like Golding homes. I know in my ward they go a lot to see those guys that live there, and they are the ones that really know the communities, and they spot illnesses and causes of ill health a lot quicker. So I just wondered if we could put those in again. And also, because this is really a three sort of a triangle, really, isn't it? It's the NHS, it's us, but then it is also KCC as the upper tier authority. So I can only assume they'll be doing their own response. But I think, and I get that time didn't allow for a more combined one, but I think it would be good to just say, to make sure that we were all getting on board with this, and perhaps we could work on it together. But yeah, that simple point, GPs, NHS dentists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Springer. Thank you. I mean, I hear exactly what Councillor Clark is saying about the Dorothy Lucy Centre and SEN, but they're KCC. KCC has no money. So the big elephant in the room is we need to say, you need to give money to the councils that provide these services. We're not saying, I know they're asking, how can you improve it? How can more money? We need having big capital letters enabling more money. And we just don't seem to be saying it. We're pussyfooting around the outside. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Can I?
Well, I was addressed directly. It's a fair point. It's a fair point. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think we can get drawn down the line of where does the money fit in, but that's what we need. We've segregated social care with medical care, and we just need to look at it end to end. Wherever it fits, we need to make sure that it's seamless and working. And yeah, you're right. You're totally right about the money.
Thank you, Councillor Keeley.
Thank you. Again, echoing what Councillor Russell said, I think it's a really good response so quickly. So thank you for that. Dentistry and GPs, absolutely. And, you know, maybe commenting on the fact that dentistry has a physical effect on your health as well. It can affect your heart. It can give you heart attacks. It can give you blood clots. It can kill you if you have really manky teeth. And travelling to an NHS dentist that's travelable to, I know people that go to Chatham to go to an NHS dentist. I'm lucky I've got one. Unless I'm being a complete donut, I haven't seen mental health mentioned. I'm taking it as a whole holistic thing. I might have missed it because I did read it quickly, so apologies. But again, that runs through all of it, a holistic overview of all these things. I've got 20 years experience of health and social care, and all these things are so tightly connected, but there's quite often a lack of communication between all these resources, and you're repeating things. You know, like we have the system when somebody dies, you tell us once. That kind of pulling that information out would save a lot of time. Might be expensive software, but that would be a way of going, right, now so-and-so's going here, I've got this information, rather than re-traumatizing somebody, asking them again and again and again. I know you need to double check. An example, I think 2.6 of enabling well-resourced GP services. We've got on the Green Sand Ridge a surgery that has a walk-in clinic, and that is fantastic because it's still a walk for people to get there. It's not ideal, but you don't have to make an appointment. You can go with something new, which I reckon will save lives because people won't be put off. So that sort of small thing. And digital exclusion, again, it's not even people that are out in the sticks. I'm 3.5 miles from here and my service is so poor and my internet service is so poor, it buffers and buffers and buffers that, you know, you give up in the end. So an alternative way is definitely a way forward, but otherwise, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone want to come back on those comments? Sorry.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Christine, to writing this report, because I thought it was amazing. I actually shed tears reading this report. Myself being from a single parent household, having been subject to no fault eviction twice before, I understand the insecurities that so many families face across Maidstone. I wanted to come back on a couple of reports, a couple of comments that people have made. In Maidstone, we have a wonderful daycare centre that provides respite for families, provided by Garden of England Home Care, which is amazing. Invictical Care Home, they're providing activities for people with dementia to allow families respite, and we don't celebrate enough the work that's going on. Maidstone Tunbridge Wells Trust investing loads in training staff. They're having regular cohorts moving to the area that they're training, and they're going on to do wonderful work. Digital exclusion, we have Digital Kent working really hard, recruiting volunteers, they're champions that will go out, spend time with people. A lot of people, it's just purely a lack of confidence, and having somebody to spend an hour with you, showing you how to use that smartphone. So sometimes we just don't celebrate the great things that are going on around us. The only thing I wanted to say in response to the letter was, it includes the 3 words that I really hate: hard to reach communities. If we can reword it, because it's not about hard to reach communities, it's hard to reach services. It's people that have had their fingers burnt, they've had horrible experiences, and it's not them that's hard to reach, it's that they don't want to engage because of their experiences.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond?
Hello. Thank you everyone for your comments. I really appreciate them. I completely agree with the words hard to reach. Coming from a hard to reach community myself, I hate it. I think it was probably in the rush. So I will definitely just reword that. I see no issue in being able to incorporate everything from respite care, which is really important, SEN provision, which I don't think is mentioned enough. And I do, if you miss mental health in the quick read, it probably means that someone's going to miss it if they're reading it, so it will bolster that, and dentistry as well. So yes, I thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So I propose the recommendations. Is there a seconder? Several. Thank you. We'll take Councillor Clark, I think is the seconder. Sorry, do we agree the proposals? Thank you.
Chair, if I may, can I repeat that with this item and the one that I shall speak to later in the meeting, that we very much invite further submissions from members. So can that please be emphasised to our colleagues? Our period of listening has not just ended. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, which is the industrial strategic consultation proposals. So again, that's you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. It appears that it's me again. The same procedure applies. The industrial strategy consultation was announced on the 14th of October. It closes on the 24th of November, arriving slightly before the 10-year consultation on the NHS. As I've already explained, we had a decision to make in Cabinet as to precisely which way we wish to go with this, and I'm very grateful. Director Karen Britton is here this evening. Officer Chris Inwood has been extremely busy behind the scenes in working with us in constructing this report, which asked 35 questions, not just 5. It's a considerable piece of work. This report covers a response to the Department for Business and Trade public consultation call on Invest 2035, the UK's modern industrial strategy green paper. It came to us because the Kent and Medway Economic Partnership, KMEP, invited comments from the Kent districts to assist them in shaping their response, to which we responded, well, yes, we will produce a response and we will share it with you, but we will bring it to this council first. So that is what we have done. The new modern industrial strategy will be the government's 10-year plan. That's the government's 10-year plan, not ours, with a primary objective of long-term sustainable growth in our highest growth driving sectors. That's their statement. The Department for Business and Trade identify 8 growth driving sectors. Again, they then ask us which are the correct subsectors within these 8 to focus on. What are the UK's strengths and capabilities in these subsectors? And what are the enablers and barriers in these subsectors? So Maidstone Borough Council's response comes under, firstly, whether or not we accept these 8 sectors. We were not asked for our opinion, but we have given it. We feel most of these sectors are important in the local region, but we feel the list is not complete. It also includes sectors and industries that do not always contribute positively to social value, human or nature rights, or to the environment. You will be interested to know that when Councillor Jeffrey presented these remarks to KMEP yesterday in the online meeting, there was considerable approval for that statement, which I have to say we didn't know how that was going to go down, but it was received very well. Secondly, we addressed the point as to whether, if the list isn't complete, what's missing from it. While we recognise the crossover into the remit of DEFRA, we insist that the new industrial strategy explicitly references investment in sustainable agriculture, horticulture, regenerative farming methods, and circular economy business models, which will be key to balancing the UK's transforming economy with our natural environment. Under skills, we think that there should be relevant and appropriate training in schools post-16 and as well as pre-16. Health has already been mentioned in the previous item. It should be jointly informed by employers, and educational initiatives such as Education for Sustainable Development and Education for a Sustainable Future should be linchpins in the future curriculum. In more recent years, the public sector has had a role in investing in industrial sites to bring forward commercial development. That is not always as viable as housing development, particularly in the south east. So councils have been involved in de-risking sites and bringing forward market confidence and demand, of which Maidstone's Innovation Centre is a signal example. We're very proud of the fact that it is very nearly full up, and we are actively looking at doing more of the same and of similar novel proposals, which will require accessing external finance. So finance and investment would be the third strand. The fourth would be energy. As a broad principle, we want to see electricity generation fully decarbonised, along with a significant reduction in demand through retrofit in existing businesses, public and personal use, to allow for increased demand in sectors that require it. In its current usage, the concept of net zero is particularly flawed. We need to reduce carbon emissions to zero rather than allow fantasy offsets as mitigation. Under regulation, we need the right regulations for the right ends, respectful of people and planet, and therefore fair to business. The globalised model is all too often unfair to all three. While our priority is for local and circular economy, this council is very much open to mutual beneficial links at the international scale. We recently hosted a large delegation from the Qingqiao Industrial Ecological Park from Shanghai. A very pleasant day to encourage innovation, understand each country's policy needs, and support economic growth through investment opportunities. I can't resist the opportunity to point out to you that our Chinese colleagues arrived with some very new IT, which wasn't compatible with the system at the Maidstone Innovation Centre. And the day was spectacularly rescued by Yinki Bai, a Maidstone Borough Council officer who works in the housing department, whose abilities in industrial level Mandarin translation paid off most handsomely. It was a spectacular rescue of what otherwise would have been a rather disappointing meeting. So well done to Inkeep. We, lastly on skills and metrics, we expect government support in the prioritisation of national and local finance initiatives with priority over global partnerships, local over global. The Council agrees that the Industrial Skills Council should engage with various key non-government institutions and organisations, and KMEP, the Kent Medway and Economic Partnership, has representation of these key partners and can assist the Industrial Skills Council with strategic engagement, economic data, and identify the key economic priorities to support the industrial strategy. I note with some pleasure this evening that it has been already stated that we disagree with the government's drive for growth and building on grey and green belt. This is a helpful support to our ambitions. Lastly, on metrics, how do we measure the outcomes? Monitoring the success of the industrial strategy should be in combination with metrics measuring health and well-being of communities and the well-being and recovery of the natural environment in the places and regions in which the strategy is being implemented. I appreciate this is a radical departure from previous practice, but this is the donut principle, striking balance and equilibrium in all respects. And we intend to co-create this and welcome, as I said before, your constructive thoughts, criticisms and contributions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for this. So I'm going to take umbrage with the sentence that says, moreover, the administration are moving away from a focus on growth at any cost and in any way approach. I think you could probably put the full stop after growth. And that's not just me saying that, that's ably demonstrated by page 40, where it says our current economic development strategy, written in 2019, identifies 5 priorities. Number 1, open for business. Number 2, a greener, more productive economy. Number 3, a thriving rural economy. 4, inclusive growth, and 5, a destination Maidstone town centre. So I think you can see from our current economic development strategy, which my administration obviously put forward, it wasn't growth at any cost in any way. I think that is unfair. Pleased to see the nod to farming, but fundamentally this is a consultation response from your administration into the Green Paper. So I mean, this isn't obviously how I would have done it, because obviously we had the previous economic development strategy, which I agreed with. But this is the new approach that's going to cabinet's going up. So I think you should write whatever you want to write into that consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of things that stuck out. In terms of your, in terms of the energy capacity, I was struck by 10 years ago, actually, to 2014, I sat on a select committee who was focused on energy security, and I remember a talk from Christ Church University in Canterbury, where they had optimised their carbon footprint. They'd done their campus, their development had all these different elements, including solar. I think they included wind also. So they actually came up with a really quite amazing ability to generate their own energy, and it went beyond their own requirements. However, they were then struck with the sort of inconvenience of finding ways of using that energy on site to waste it, because the energy grid outside of Christ Church University just wasn't up to the capacity, wasn't up to the sort of robustness for the level of energy provided. So I think that we do need to look at what we've got, because it's pointless putting something somewhere and finding that that turns out to be completely inappropriate. I can give an example of that, which is the incinerator at Allington, where if you go up to the top of the incinerator in Allington, there are these massive arrays of radiators. It looks like a huge air source heat pump, but actually it's the enormous amount of heat that they generate. In Europe, they put these incinerators in the center of cities. They can use that heat and actually give it for free quite often to businesses. However, we put it right out there on a limb, and we then have all this energy that we can't do anything with other than dissipate into the atmosphere. I remember being on that site probably 7 or 8 years ago, and the people that were running it saying, we've got all this housing development, the Bridge Nursery is going up, there's some housing development across the Coal Harbour roundabout. We've got all this energy on site, and yet there's nothing in terms of national policy that can tap into this enormous waste. So we've got people across the way, maybe they may have financial concerns about the cost of energy. We've got all this going free. I think we've got to have that front and center of our thinking, because it's one thing to come up with these ways of generating power, harnessing power, but if we're going to have to dissipate it into the air because we can't use it, it's absolutely crazy. On that select committee, I remember saying, and it was vetoed, that we should raise with the government the impact if the Russians were to turn the gas off on the pipeline through Ukraine. And I remember being told, well, that's completely outside of our mandate. But my argument at the time was that's one thing that can really impact the energy security within Kent, because if the price goes up, it doesn't matter how much of it you've got, people won't have it. So that is part of the energy security picture. Unfortunately, it was outside of our mandate, so it didn't get carried forward. But I really think that we need to get up to speed with where we can put these initiatives.
Thank you, Councillor Harper.
I'll start off by referencing a typo, which I just spotted. So if you go to page 40, the last paragraph as written now doesn't make sense. In line with the UK, Maidstone District is a micro SME economy. Maidstone, I think that could be rewritten a bit better. Reading this, it's very sectarian. Having just come back from Northern Ireland, where my in-laws live, I find that a bit disappointing. So, there's a number of references, and yes, council administrations change, but Maidstone Borough Council's brackets Green and Independent Alliance, and then moreover, the administration is moving away from stuff. And I think, as Councillor Russell, just to point out, the reference to the Maidstone Economic Development Strategy, yes, that was written in 2019 when this was a hung council, and I was actually the chair of the committee responsible for approving and pushing through the economic development strategy. It wasn't a Conservative, it was me when I was sitting as a Labour councillor, when we had a situation where different committees had chairs from the Liberal Democrats, from Labour and the Conservatives, and independents at that time. And I think the 2019 strategy, which is still the existing council policy, needs to be referred to as such. Now, it may be, and I don't necessarily have a problem with the council in the future wishing to move, as you state in 1, 2, 3, 4, in your 5th paragraph down, a donut and circular economy principles, but that is not council policy currently. Council policy currently, in terms of economic development, is the economic development strategy approved back in 2019. And you may wish to submit separate from Maidstone Council, but I don't think you can submit on behalf of the council and refer to stuff which is not council policy, is not being approved by the Cabinet, has not been approved by the Development Policy Advisory Committee. Maybe an aspiration, and it clearly is, but it's not current council policy. And so, unlike all the other consultations we see, we don't normally see them written with, Green and Independent Alliance, because that's automatically requesting everybody else to oppose it. If you're not a member of the Green and Independent Alliance, you're excluded from this. So out of the 9 members here, this is really, it can only be addressing the 4 members sitting opposite, because Labour Conservative and Independent and Fountain Oakwood are not members of the Green and Independent Alliance. There's a lot in this report I do support, but I'm just concerned from the slightly sectarian phraseology adopted in it, which I think is quite exclusive and not inclusive, which I know is your general approach, Stephen, to have an inclusive approach. I definitely support, and I've written down before Brian mentioned about energy, because yes, it's really good that we want to have more energy and more sustainable energy in this country. We want to go for greater electrification. However, our national grid currently wouldn't allow it, because you could, as you point the examples, you can produce all the electricity you like, but you can't actually get it onto the national grid. And as soon as you get the national grid, typically you're told it's anything up to a 20-year waiting period. So I think one of the things we do need to feed back is the need to address a national grid, because if we are going to decarbonise by whatever date, we have to have the ability to produce a massive amount of sustainable energy. I mean, there were programmes on the BBC a couple of years ago saying if you wanted to have everybody driving hybrid or electric cars and getting your heating from ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps, you'd probably increase electric demand in this country 2- or 3-fold over what is produced now. So you have to look, for the government has to seriously look at how is it planning to increase electricity production by 300% and get that distributed so we can decarbonise by either 2030 or 2035, whichever target they're setting themselves, because without addressing that, then everything else falls apart in terms of moving to carbon neutrality. If we can't produce the electricity in the quantity we need, and if we can't get it distributed, then we're not going to, it's going to be impossible. So either policy will have to change from central government away from those targets, or let go that and we suddenly find 70% of the population don't have transport to private cars anymore because there's not enough electricity in the country to power them. And who would you ration your vehicles to? Yeah, most of our trains in this country aren't electric. We're living in the one part of the country where Southern Railways electrified the system back in the 1930s, but the vast bulk of the rail network, for instance, this country runs on diesels, or now in some places on hybrid trains. I mean, you know, the aspiration of this industrial policy is good, and one I think is probably overdue. I just think some of the reality behind it, and I say power is the key thing, needs to be given full consideration before you try to use that as a basis of rebuilding your economy, which is what I'd like to see. And I would welcome for you when we're at some point having discussions about the donut economy. I've got an idea of what some of that phraseology means, but it's not one which, as a council, we've discussed at this stage. So as I say, think about the tone and some of the terminology perhaps, but also, as I say, really push on this power thing, because the whole policy of the government moving for a sustainable industrial policy features electricity. And if we can't produce the electricity, how on earth are we going to do it?
Thank you. Yes, respond.
I'm very grateful to members' contributions, and again, after folk have slept on it and further ideas come to mind, please do share those. Addressing Councillor Harper and Councillor Russell's comments about who we're speaking for, I was sensitive to the potential criticism here. I can only beg your indulgence. As I hope we've made clear, KMEP made the request to us. The meeting actually took place yesterday. The verbal meeting took place yesterday, and we will send this report after we've considered your comments as quickly to them as possible. We do not think that other districts went to the trouble of consulting with their members. We felt that it was important to show that there has been a change of view in this council, and I appreciate the delicate nature of that. I hope that no offence is taken. It was not intended, but we needed to show it used to be this, and it is now either is this or it is going to be this, and that is the reason that happened, because we were asked put into KMEP's consultation, and we will also be sending that obviously to national government. In both this case and in the case of the NHS consultation, of course, members will realise that there's a certain proportion of both consultation responses which will directly inform our policies, and members obviously will be alert to those. Some of them apply to Kent and our other neighbours, and obviously some of them are directed at the national level. You, I'm sure, will remind us quickly of the things that fall within our present remit, and of course we wish to work positively within that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll propose the recommendations. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Are we all in agreement of that? So we take a vote. So who's in agreement with the proposals? Yeah.
We obviously there's quite a good debate there. The assumption is that we're taking it forward with the comments that we've made this evening, because some of those are additional to the report. So as long as the cabinet member could perhaps confirm that. Okay.
Yeah, so with the comments taken into consideration, so we'll take a vote on that. So who's in favour? And me. Who's against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Item 13, we have the infrastructure funding statement. That's over to you, Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Jarman's presenting this, I believe.
Yes. The infrastructure funding statement, some councillors have heard me say this already, is like your bank statement, as in it's money coming in, hopefully, and money going out. So the money coming in is coming from two sources: Section 106 legal agreements and the Community Infrastructure Levy, abbreviation SIL. And it's money going out, and the infrastructure funding statement breaks down the types of SIL and, perhaps more importantly, what the money is being spent on. Unlike our bank statements, it is public because the government some years ago wanted full transparency of the amounts of, in effect, public money coming in and going out. And the government has made this mandatory. We have to publish it on our website before the end of the calendar year, and it looks back at the previous financial year, i.e. 23-24. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
That was super quick. A couple of questions, then comment, if I may. Questions first. On page 60, the grass maintenance on the SIL, and then on page 61 for the survey for the Great Crested Newts. I just really wanted to ask a question, because I thought that infrastructure was a brand new thing that you had to have, and it wasn't spent for maintenance, and it wasn't spent for a report. It had to be an actual thing, whatever that thing was, whether it's a defibrillator or a public right of way that was resurfaced. I thought that was my understanding. So that's my question. If you could answer that, that'd be great. And then my comment after.
This is in reference to the neighbourhood SIL. Yeah. So definitely with the Section 106 legal agreement, you couldn't use money for maintenance because there are 3 legal tests which make it very clear what you can and can't get developers to pay in the way of a Section 106. However, it's much more looser with the community infrastructure levy, particularly with neighbourhood SIL. The legislation's framed as in parish council, as you know, Councillor Russell, they get more in simple terms if they have a neighbourhood plan, and the neighbourhood plan should be very transparent in terms of what the infrastructure needs of the parish or community area are. Much looser.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I suppose just coming back on that, I would want to see the infrastructure be things. I wouldn't want this to get absorbed into like a revenue budget, but it, you know, as long as that meets the definition, then thank you for explaining that. My overriding concern with SIL, and this is one of the reasons as well that we're looking at it in overview and scrutiny, is that we just never have enough money. Like, I think it was a good scheme, but like when you look at the page, what's my page now? 72, which says that in C, since 2019, the total amount of SIL collected prior to the reported periods, that's everything we've collected up to this period, isn't it? We've got 6 million. That's not going to buy us a lot, is it? When we're talking about big bits of infrastructure that we want for our borough. So I think that is one thing that we need to give heavy consideration to going forwards. And I know that that's, you know, comes down to SIL rates and things like that, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't seem enough that it's going to buy our borough anything that it desperately needs infrastructure wise. The other thing is on the Section 106 side of things, it's money in, out, but because Section 106 has been running for a really long time, I am conscious that there is a certain amount that if it hasn't been spent could be given back to developers. So I would really welcome that row being inserted in there, even if it's zero. If the amount is zero, fantastic, tick. But I think we do need to start, as this scheme of Section 106 is now aged, I think we do need to start keeping an eye on that as well, because this is the scheme, because obviously it's historic, where we've got a lot more money. So at the moment, you know, we've got C again, so that's 10 million, 10.5 million. So I think we need to just be conscious that we keep that within our borough and spend it on things that we said we were going to spend it on, and track what, if anything, hopefully nothing, is given back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
I think the officer wanted to come back, so I'm happy to give way for a moment.
Fine.
Yeah, I was just going to say some very good points there. Yeah, as you alluded to, Councillor Russell, I think I'm right in saying that the rates haven't changed since their inception, which must be about 9 years ago, perhaps 8 years ago. So there's a quick win there, I would have thought. But as you know as well, the percentage we ask for in terms of affordable housing in the country, in the villages and countryside outside the town, is 40%. So on, say, if we grant permission for a new housing estate of 100 units, 40 of them will be affordable and 40 of them will not pay any SIL at all. It's fairly common for relatively small developments in the villages, but particularly in the town centre, for the entire scheme to be, in my language, flipped over to 100% affordable housing. You see that on the Tunbridge Road a lot. So again, you don't pay any community infrastructure levy if there's any affordable housing, particularly in the town centre. Again, you know, a lot of the new units are changes of use from sort of 1970s offices to residential. CIL is only charged on net new build. So a lot of them, they're paying hardly any CIL because it's only on the net increase in floor space. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
To give way, because I think there was a response.
I'm going to be really quick. I was just wondering if we could, if the committee was minded to ask the cabinet member to have a look at changing the CIL rates, putting them up, and have a look at the charges for the affordable housing and the change of use. Maybe there wouldn't be the same amount as the main CIL, but I think like they would be some quick wins going forward to try and make sure that we can get some of the infrastructure. I don't know if anyone would be minded to come with me and ask for that request.
Councillor Keeling.
Sorry, only that I completely agree with Councillor Russell, because that's what we've been looking at, and Councillor Harper as well, that even if it's a small amount, it's something, because otherwise there's big areas having no input, apart from what is in the pot already. But absolutely, I'd look into that with you as well. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Maybe the cabinet member might want to come back, so I will just offer that. If
I'll get over and done with. For poor Brian, yes, the whole point has been discussed because we were looking at other documents about updating the whole issue around what our infrastructure list is from CIL, and the point is well made about the quantum of affordable housing that's coming forward, not just in terms of kind of greenfield sites and so on, but also conversions and new build in the urban area. Indeed, in the last 5 years, a third of all the affordable housing that has come forward in the whole of Kent across all 12 districts has been in Maidstone Borough. And I mean, we know there's a lot of development going on, but I think that underlines just how much of the brunt of this development Maidstone Borough is absorbing.
Thank you, Nish.
Thank you. So my point actually is for Rob, and there's a couple of points actually, Rob. One of them, the second point that I'll make, if you haven't got the information, I'm happy to take it offline. But the first point is to do with highways improvement plans with the parishes. I'm working with 2 parishes. Well, my ward is 2 parishes essentially. And when the boundary change happened, one of the first things that struck me was that I was told that the parishes were told by KCC that they could only have 2 schemes on their hip. But when I spoke to the CIL officer about the money that the parishes had to spend, that there was a disparity. They essentially, we've got this CIL money, it times out, we need to spend it. But looking for, as we sort of went forward, I've sort of challenged it. It now appears that isn't going to be the case going forward. Now, my concern is that, well, my question is there a bottleneck? We want to get rid of our CIL as quickly as we can if it's allocated. The money's been collected, we don't want it to time out. But do you see a bottleneck in delivering highways improvement schemes across the borough with the parishes? Or do you see that as something which is working at a point where we're spending our CIL without risk of losing it by it sort of timing out? That's my first question, I guess.
Yeah, with CIL, that there isn't the risk of timing out. And like I said, responded to Councillor Russell, there's an awful lot of flexibility in spending CIL, particularly the neighbourhood element of it. I am familiar with Kent County Council highway practice in that I can't remember the exact radius, but like you said, Councillor Clark, they won't have 2 significant highway projects going on with, I think it's within 3 miles of each other at any given point. So Yeah, they, in pragmatic terms, and I think you know this, even if SIL money was given over for a particular project, yeah, because Kent County Council are the highways authority, they would still be able to govern the timing of the project.
So that's very helpful. The other question I've got, which is the more grainy question, is on page 70. There's a list of highway schemes under infrastructure. There's a couple of schemes on there. I know you're going to be familiar with them, Rob. So Willington Street, Wallace Avenue junction improvements, and also it mentions the Wheatsheaf junction, Willington Street to Wheatsheaf junction. Now, the Willington Street, Wallace Avenue improvements they've actually been put back to the end of our program of integrated transport strategy projects, and it's at the moment that's indeterminate. There is no current plan for, there's no current design for that junction that is being taken forward, and essentially we've got a whole bunch of other measures in the ITS that will come forward according to the way it's being managed before that one that's been put right to the end. And I just wondered, is it entirely SIL that's funding that scheme? Because my understanding was that with the 3 developments at Langley Park, there was some section 106 or 278, and I'm sort of concerned about losing that if that times out. I don't know if that's a hypothetical or an actual, but also with the Wheatsheaf junction, which in the last JTB, KCC are now promoting a do minimum scheme, which means that instead of doing any sort of junction improvement in terms of reconfiguration or demolishing the pub that they now own, they're looking to do just lining and traffic light sequencing timing changes. And I'm just wondering, how does that affect what we have here as the Wheatsheaf junction improvements, if we only do such a small scheme there?
I might have to get back to you offline, Councillor Clark, but what I am clear on is the only SIL monies at a strategic level that have gone, although we've taken it back now, the only community infrastructure levy monies did go towards the Bearsted Road improvement works, which I think, as you know, are on hold at the moment. And the reason why MBC decided to give money towards that scheme was to accelerate its delivery, and I think everybody knows it's on hold. So obviously we've taken that money back. All the other schemes are definitely Section 106 schemes. I'll have to get back to you in terms of each specific one, because how can I say this? Obviously, when we negotiate with developers with Section 106s, we don't want a timeout clause. So we try to remove them. So on a lot of Section 106s, it's a real mishmash. Some are 5 years, some are less than that, but a lot of them increasingly don't have a timeout clause. Dare I say it, Maidstone in the past hasn't had really major developments in isolation. So in my experience, a lot of developers sort of write off the costs before they start building.
I'm happy to carry that offline, but thank you. I appreciate that response, Rob.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a very interesting report, a lot of facts and figures for the government to absorb. Obviously, the community infrastructure levy has been referred to earlier. We've got our overview and scrutiny working party looking into that, and I think that will address, I don't know if it's Councillor Clark's concern about why a lot of the neighbourhood SIL hasn't been spent, because that will be one of our areas of focus over the next next few months as we're working through. The section 106, I think is perhaps more of a concern because SIL money, once we've got it in the bank, it will stay there, I suppose, in theory, forever until it's allocated to a scheme. It doesn't return to anybody because it's a tax, basically. They pay the tax to do a project, and that tax revenue sits with the council until it's spent on whatever. Section 106 is obviously a bit different. It's the concept of it is planning mitigation. It's effectively planning mitigation. So someone's doing a development. The development is going to lead to X, Y, and Z. Therefore, they give Section 106 money from the council or whoever to spend on mitigating measures. And obviously, highways tends to be one of the dominating things. Now, it's not in this report because it didn't occur in 2023-24, but it would probably go back to around about I can't remember the date because we discussed this at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, about 5 or 6 years ago when the council handed over a large amount of Section 106 money, I think, to KCC to undertake a lot of the works actually which Councillor Clark referred to on page 70, or including those works, but all the other major road junctions around the borough, of which we know a large number of them have either been shelved or shrunk on a massive scale or just not happened. Yet that money, as I say, was passed over a few years ago, and we're in the process, I know from overview and scrutiny, of trying to get KCC to tell us what the money was spent on, because in theory, because if Section 106, you haven't done it within the relevant time scale, like is it 5, 10 years or something like that, but if you haven't spent it on what it's supposed to be in that period, the developer is entitled to ask or have their money back because it was given to the council to be spent on stuff which was a direct result of the development they've gone with, which is why it's Section 106. And I think there's concerns that KCC has collected in a lot of SIL, and sorry, not a lot of Section 106 over the years and has never spent it, or has not necessarily spent it on what it was raised for initially. And I'm wondering to what extent do we get returns from KCC to substantiate what the Section 106 passed via then is actually being spent on. Because if we are being required under the relevant legislation to produce a statement each year, we're saying that from our points of view, this money, the Section 106 has been spent on X, Y, and Z, and we're listing the schemes. But I've got a question mark based on our discussions in the working view as to when the money comes into, Checkpoint or Kent County Council, 10 million pound, 5 million pound, whatever, whether that actually ever goes to what we gave them the money to be spent on. What assurance does KCC ever provide us that what we're giving them is actually being spent on the relevant schemes?
So every English council has to produce an infrastructure funding statement. As I said, they are just statements. So that includes Kent County Council. So they will be in exactly the same position where they'll have to set out how much money has come in, how much money has gone out. And in answer to Councillor Harper's question, they'll have to set out how much money is in the bank, so to speak. And I'd encourage members to go to their meeting or to contact their county councillors so that their IFS can be scrutinised.
All right, thank you. Any more comments? No? Right, this report is. Oh, sorry.
Just a very minor point on page 60. It's got 3 items down there for Bearsted. The way I thought SIL worked was a lump of money got passed on to the parish and then they choose to spend it on what they want. The parish council paid the design fee for Autumn Lane signs, I believe. The parish council paid the Copsewood Way Double Yellow Lights. We did get SIL money to the Ware Street build out, but it certainly wasn't 2,800. It was about 8,200. So there's a little bit of creative accounting there. I don't quite know what's gone wrong, but those figures are a little bit confusing to me. So I'm just going to throw that one out there. I don't want an answer. I'm just saying this, it doesn't quite ring with the way I think the system sort of works. That's all. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. Could I just say, I'd encourage all councillors to do this. On our web pages, we've got a direct link to our Exicom system. So if councillors are interested just how much money's in the pot, so to speak, just go on our Exicom system. And I've asked our Section 106 / SIL manager, Carol Williams, to give drop-in training sessions again on using Exicom. But I think a number of councillors have used it fairly recently. Thank you.
Right, thank you. As I said, this is for noting. Do we all agree to note it? Thank you. Item 14, revised Southern Water Resources Management Plan consultation.
Right, thank you, Chair. Before we get excited, this isn't about wastewater and getting rid of water that Southern Water causes a few challenges. This is a water resources consultation, and in terms of the impact within Maidstone Borough, it's a relatively few properties in part of Bredhurst that are on the Medway system receive Southern Water as a potable water source. But there is another implication in that some of the water taken by Southern Water actually comes out of my ward from the River Medway, and is cleaned up, obviously, I hope, and sent to people in Medway Towns. The response is outlined on your papers between 83 and 85, page 83 and page 85, and it's basically just referencing back to our local plan and the policies we reference there, which are generic and don't just apply to South East Water, but they will also apply to Southern Water. But we do flag the point that water quality and therefore wastewater issues are a consideration because of their impact upon the water we're abstracting from the River Medway. I think it's quite simple and straightforward. I think we agreed as well that we would, like we did with the NPPF, write a separate letter setting out some of the concerns that we have in areas like the Weald and parts of urban Maidstone, where the wastewater system is currently causing us some challenges. But any comments gratefully received. Thank you.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, obviously I read in the report that a separate letter was being sent. So are we able to see a copy of that letter?
We can when it's written, can't we?
Indeed, so currently being drafted. We'll be running it past councillors first, but don't worry. If Councillor Harwood is happy, obviously can run it past other members as well.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. It's just a very minor comment, really. On question 6 about this, trying to get the average use per person down from 128 litres to 110 litres per person per day. I would do as a support with reservations. Now, I know it's in our local plan, that's what we want to do, but you have no way of enforcing it unless you actually read the water meter on a property and go, well, there's only 3 people there and they can only have 330 litres. So we're going to turn the tap off now, chaps, because you've had your daily limit. So I would just like item 6 to be a support with reservations, because it's a great idea, but there is no way to enforce it unless you start looking at people's water meters and turning a tap off. And it's just encouraging more houses because, oh, yes, we can get that usage down, so we'll have enough water. And I don't think we will. I think they've got to try a bit harder. I'm very concerned about trying to get water usage down when you have absolutely no way of doing that, apart from asking nicely. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
On number 5, it's around about droughts and water scarcity, which I think most of us recognise will become more frequent and severe, and given the development going on in the southeast, increasingly so. I just wonder if there's the option, obviously, support with reservations, to, in any free text, to put in about what they should be looking at is a national water sort of grid, where we can bring water down from where it flows. Well, sorry, it rains a lot in Scotland and Wales, and transfer the water down to the southeast where it doesn't rain a lot, and it tends to be, semi-drought conditions. Because if we don't do something like that, at some point the water will literally just run out, and having hosepipe pans won't be enough. Water, as Councillor Spring will end up having to be rationed. It'll be the only way to ensure people have some water supply, because there's just not the water resources in the southeast part of the country, which is the area controlled by Southern Water. It's probably, other than East Anglia, the driest part of the country. So why can't we be asking for the government or some, the water companies to actually look at ways of transferring water from parts of the country where there's a massive abundance of it and it's not being used, to parts where it's not, especially when in number 7 they're talking about shipping water via sea tankers from Norway.
Just to come back on that, it's technically not feasible. Water is very heavy and very difficult to pump, the amount of energy that's required to do it. And also, it's got to be said that, yes, the southeast is the most water stressed part of the UK, but we've had significant droughts impacting other parts of the UK in recent years where they didn't have the water anyway. So I think the way forward is around reducing water use. And yes, that is only an aspiration, and there's different ways to put it through. But we use an awful lot of water in the UK compared to other countries in Europe, because for historic reasons, I think. But we are an overcrowded island with ever more erratic rainfall patterns, and I think we've got to get used to the fact that water is not literally a free resource.
Councillor Clark.
It's a tactic really. My area, there's a lot of springs in my area from what was Toggle when I was in South Ward to Lewes, Linton. And the first thing that I think of when there's a water leak is there chlorine in the water? Is there not chlorine? And that comes down to, is it an actual pipe that's leaking or is it a spring? And that goes back to, when I became a county councillor back in 2013. But more recently, well, actually within the last 6 weeks, we had 4-way traffic lights at the Bourton Parade. Huge problems on the A229 because of that, because it wasn't synced with the wheat sheaf. It was Southeast Water actually. They dug up the road. They got to a point where they found the pipe that was leaking. They did not find any leaking on the pipe, and then they tested for chlorine, and it turned out it was a spring that had caused the initial issue. I mean, that was a major issue in our area for days, and they actually had a clear visual source that they could have tested, and I just feel that should be the first thing that's tested whenever there's a water leak, because fair enough, that was not a leak, but the money that was spent on it could have been used to address a leak.
Thank you.
Have you got opportunity to put any comments in this, or is it just tick box? Because something that came up at overview and scrutiny when we were talking about topics was water, that so often on planning applications, their water company's comment is no comment. So is there some way of getting that back to them about engaging them better in the planning stages and actually having some sort of procedure more in place for them to be able to comment and actually have a say and have an active word, an active part in what's happening when there's building going on. Because if they keep putting no comment and there's not saying that there's an issue when we are short of water, they need to get in and look at what they can do. Is it feasible? If it isn't, what can they do to make it more feasible? Sorry if that's not in your remit.
On page 85, that there is a free text box. And I think that the problem we've got with the water companies is the water companies, when water privatisation occurred, part of the deal in the Act of Parliament was they would deliver water to new properties and they would take away wastewater. And they kind of acknowledge that, but we all know the reality is, particularly in places like Coxheath, where it's a long way from Hockers Lane where the water needs to come from to be stored at Linton Hill, and then it bursts out all over the street in Lewes and elsewhere. But I should think we could put a section there about having that two-way conversation with the water companies about water supply, and if, because we know we're in a water stress area or we're at the end of the network, it is technically difficult. The water companies need to say that, because it could inform spatial planning decisions around where growth occurs. I mean, for example, there's a lot of development going on in Coxheath at the moment, and you know to your cost that places like Coxheath, places like Staplehurst, are the first to fall over whenever we have a dry period, or whenever we have frozen pipes or whatever, because it's just such a long way from where the water is pumped from. So if we could have more honesty perhaps in those conversations, it one could inform their investment decisions about infrastructure, but it also could inform our spatial decisions and some of our development management decisions. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Sorry, just also there's constantly low pressure. So it's not even when there's a particular stress, there's a low pressure problem a lot of the time. Obviously the geography of it as well, you're up on the hill, that needs to be taken back to them. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the comments. So I propose that we agree the recommendations. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Do we all agree? Thank you. Item 15. So, Arching Conservator Area Management Plan. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm online. Hopefully you can all hear me.
Yes.
Yep, perfect. Hello. The next few items are all conservation area based. The overarching conservation management plan is a document that helps support the conservation areas that currently don't have a conservation area appraisal, a management plan, and helps provide additional support to those that have got an outdated management plan. So it's a temporary measure. It's been through the public consultation process, so the hope of this evening is that the management plan will be recommended for Councillor Tony Harwood to sign off for it to become an adopted document to help with the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Since this has been through public consultation and has been through various stages with ourselves before, and it is also, as just mentioned, temporary, can I move that we move it as per the papers?
Any other comments? Yep. So we agree. Yeah. Thank you. Item 16.
Back to me again. This is Bearsted Conservation Area Appraisal Review under the Planning Act, Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990, we have a responsibility as the local planning authority to review from time to time is the terminology, is legal phrasing, our conservation areas. So the next 3 items, 4 items are for reviews. Sorry, 3 items of reviews. This one's for Bearsted. We are looking also to go to public consultation with this document and also discuss the slight amendment to the existing conservation area boundary, partly to link the 2 buildings, the 2 conservation areas up, to protect some ragstone walling, and to extend to include part of the railway buildings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. As ward member for Bearsted and Downswood, I'd like to thank Janice for her work on this. She came out, we walked around, we looked at all sorts of things, and she was terribly supportive. And so, first of all, thank you very much, Janice, for your work. It's excellent and very much appreciated that we were very involved. Just very quickly, page 161, I think we're missing a picture. It says it's commenting on where UPVC windows are used. And they look different from traditional. So it says figure 5, example of UPVC window and traditional window. And the only picture shown has all the UPVC ones. So I think we're missing a picture on the right that shows the traditional windows. That's in the old schoolhouse. And that was a bit of a battle because we were quite upset with the UPVC windows that were put in that were not, in our opinion as ward members, didn't capture the character of the building, which had old sliding windows and they open at the bottom, they hinge and they're horrible, but they got away with it. But I think that you need a picture. If you haven't got one, I have one of the same building with its original window in, but I think we need a picture there. Apart from that, I'm happy to propose as per the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Yeah. So do we all agree, recommendation? Thank you. Moving on to item 17, the Detling area.
Thank you. Again, like Bearsted, we've come to review the Detling Conservation Area. Again, we are proposing a extension to the conservation area, and this document's just to go out for public consultation for public comments. Thank you.
I'll propose as per the papers unless anybody wants to speak. Thank you.
Chair, with your permission, if I may, being the Boxley Downs ward councillor, including Detling, I would simply like to record my gratitude to the parish councillors and other residents who vigorously engaged with the process of getting this document to its present condition. I have to say I'm a little alarmed to see in the earlier document that some parishes haven't yet engaged with this process. We're very impressed in the Detling neighbourhood with the position that we've got to here, and thank the officers for their assistance with this. Thank you very much.
So all agreed on the recommendation? Thank you. Moving on to item 18, Marden.
Marden is like the overarching conservation area plan. This has already been out to public consultation and review, and we're looking for this one to be adopted by Councillor Tony Harwood if there's no further recommendations. So this can become an adopted conservation area management plan.
Russell.
Thanks. I'm the ward member for Marden Yalding Ward. Just one minor comment, and I think it's very funny between different planning documents. And you know, one person's small village on page 231 is another planning document's rural service centre. So it's all in the presentation, isn't it? But I think you can see like there's lots of historic assets. Happy to propose as per the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. All agree with the recommendation? Thank you. Moving swiftly on, item 19.
This is like Detling. This is a conservation area review. Again, with Otham, we are proposing quite a large proposed extension to the conservation area. So we are looking for this document to go out for public consultation early in the new year, and then put forward as a formal adopted document. Thank you.
We all agree? Yes. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. And thank you, Janice, for your forebodance attending late. And wish you all a safe journey home, and thank you for attending. Bye.